Hey, football fans, this is Gary Greene in Las Vegas, longtime sports handicapper and professional sports bettor for the past 35 years, and publisher of the Blue Book Football Betting Magazine for the last 30 years as well. And this is your Gary Wins videos, and this one is one I always look at as one of my phases that I go through before I make any of my final cuts. And it's always important to look at these. And we'll look at first the big letdown spots for this Sunday in the NFL Week number 9. And the first one is going to be the Chicago Bears as they go on the road as a pick 'em against Arizona, who has been playing well of late, and Chicago coming off the most horrific loss that any team can incur in football. In any sport, you never like to lose on a last-second play, but on a Hail Mary of that nature, after you just scored, you grinded it out down 12-0 to take the lead, and then you lost the game. This is going to be impossible to get up for this game. This is a type of game that, boy, your whole season could be derailed, and we'll find out if it is or not how they play against Arizona. But they didn't get a good opponent, really, because Arizona's scratching and clawing, well coached. Kyler Murray's playing much better. Even the defense isn't too bad of late. They're getting better. So very, very bad spot for the Chicago Bears, and I would give the letdown spot level to be extremely high. The next matchup is the team they faced and lost, my team, the Washington Commanders. They're going to travel to take on the New York Giants, and they're a 3.5-point favorite. They beat the Giants the first time 21-18. They had 7 field goals in the game. They could not score. They got inside the red zone over and over and over, but they couldn't get touchdowns. They did that again last week. 4 field goals, no touchdowns. So as much you give credit to the Commanders, it's hard for me to even say it, Commanders, but the Commanders had 480 total yards against Chicago, but they're not putting the ball in the end zone. That's a little bit of a problem, and of course you have to worry about the situation with the rib injury to the quarterback Daniels. So they're facing a Giants team that they know is really down, and there's really bad press for the Giants. The quarterback situation, they're going to leave him in there. There's just so many question marks with the Giants. It's just a matter of time how long before that coach is going to get fired at this rate. But it might be a little difficult for you to get up off a win of that nature and all the talk, and they'll still be talking about that Hail Mary on Saturday and Sunday before the game. So it's going to be hard to regroup. Hopefully for me being a fan of the Commanders that they regroup enough to just come out of there with a win. But they played the Giants a lot of close games, and the Giants, one thing that they have in their favor against Washington has been Daniel Jones running the ball. He seems to gain 60, 70, 80 yards against them every time they play, and that could pose a little bit of a problem to keep them in the game. But the money has poured in on the Washington side. It opened at 3, and it's 3.5, and that early on to get off of that number by the books is a little bit surprising. So I'd give the letdown spot level for the Commanders in this spot to be medium level. The next one we're going to look at is the look-ahead spots that you have to be wary of. Last week we told you about 2, Detroit and Green Bay, and Green Bay went out and didn't cover, back and forth. Tough game for Green Bay, but they were able to win on a last-second field goal. But they had this big game with Detroit that they knew they had circled. This is the biggest game of the year for Detroit and Green Bay because it's in a division game where the whole division is good. But we have a few spots here, and again, Detroit did cover. Green Bay did not. Detroit did cover, but I want to emphasize that they did cover with their worst offensive outing in years. The quarterback Goff, who has been red hot, and he was 15 for 18, just been pinpoint all year long, but 86 passing yards. The total team offense was like 230. So they were flat, and they were flat in my mind because they had to look ahead against Detroit. And they weren't going to show too much in that spot. They're going to save the good stuff, the gadget stuff for the Green Bay next week, Detroit. But the bottom line is they did everything right. They got turnovers, they special teams plays, punt returns, got them right down in situation, and they scored on all of them, 5 for 5 for the in the red zone for the Detroit Lions last week. But again, flat. So you got to be careful of these look-ahead spots. The ones we're looking at this week, Philly against Jacksonville. And the reason that this is a bad spot for Philly is They're coming off a gigantic win over a very good Cincinnati team who really needed that game, and Cincinnati dominated Philadelphia in the first half. But in the second half, the Eagles dominated Cincinnati. They just pulled away, score, 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 and the offense looked the best it's looked in years. So, that's bad for Commanders. Dallas, the Giants are out of it, so it doesn't matter. But that division in the East has just gotten a lot tighter as far as the Philadelphia Eagles go, because I thought that maybe they would get beat by the Bengals, and the Commanders could have had a couple game lead on them, but it didn't happen. Nice win for the Eagles, but they have Dallas on deck, and that's the game of the year for the Eagles. It hasn't been the Commanders in years past because the Commanders have been so down, and that Dallas Cowboys and the Eagles were picked to be 1-2, maybe tie at the end in the East and be two of the best teams in the NFC conference. But the bottom line is that Dallas is just not that good, but it's still a big rivalry game. So I would call the look-at level for the Philadelphia Eagles to be medium. The next one, we're going to look at Cincinnati hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. In fact, the Philly game, just so you know, the line is 7.5. So Jacksonville has not been any great shakes, but they've played a little better of late anyway. And I guess you could say Lawrence's best game quarterbacking for Jacksonville this year. He had over 300 yards passing last week. That could pose Philly a little problem because the defense is young, but some of the young kids came up big last week against Cincinnati. I was impressed. The next game, as I was mentioning, is Cincinnati hosting the Raiders. Big letdown spot, really. It's a letdown and a look ahead because you got the letdown factor off that terrible loss like that. They needed that game. They had no mulligans left to lose any more games, especially against the Eagles at home. They needed that one, but they have Baltimore, not just on deck, but on Thursday night. So they have a game in 4 days after. They're going to have to play their biggest rival, the Baltimore Ravens. They're going to need that. They need to string 5-6 wins in a row now, Cincinnati. The offense is more than capable, but they just haven't put it together at all this year. Either the offense is good and the defense is bad. The defense is bad. It's just good, and it's vice versa. It's just been a mess. But again, I would call the look-ahead level of worry for Cincinnati laying 7.5 here is very high, because how many people you think are going to go run out and take the Raiders? The books are going to need the Raiders, I'm sure. And the last game is Denver is at Baltimore, and it's really a look-ahead spot situation for both teams, because Denver has their big rival at Kansas City next week. That's a game that if they could knock them off, they could at least hang in there and stay close. They've won 4 out of 5, so they're running hot. And then, of course, for Baltimore, they're coming off a horrific loss to Cleveland, where Lamar Jackson played the worst game of his life. He missed 3 wide open guys by 20 yards wide open. He threw it over their head, not just 10 feet over their head, but 25 yards over their head. It was really bad. It was amazing that they even kept the game that close against Cleveland, and Cleveland's defense is pretty good, but the offense was really bad for the Ravens for the most part. They're going to have to go against a very tough Denver defense, young but playing better and better each week. And again, Bo Nix has been playing great for the Denver Broncos, and I think they've babied him along perfectly in the beginning of the year. He's getting acclimated, and he's a good runner. He's got 7 touchdown passes, 4 running touchdowns. So he's a factor, no doubt about it. He's going to make mistakes. All rookies are, but hell, even the good quarterbacks have terrible games and have 3 or 4 interceptions. Jordan loves throwing interceptions. He's giving away Christmas gifts left and right this year. So even the good guys do it. But I would look at this matchups for the look-ahead levels for Denver just to be medium. They're a young team, and they're not going to look past Baltimore. Baltimore is a very good team, but they're 5-3, so they know Baltimore's hungry. They're not going to look past them. But again, Kansas City on deck. But Baltimore again hosting Cincinnati next week. That's a big rivalry game, even though Cincinnati's down, and Baltimore's going to have to come up with a good performance to bounce back with a win here against Denver. But again, they could be caught peaking, so I would call that level also to be medium. Next, we have 4 teams on a bye after this week. We have Cleveland, Green Bay, the Raiders, and Seattle. Now, Cleveland's hosting the LA Chargers, so they're off a big win. They're not going to go anywhere, but the defense is still playing very hard. They have some superstar veteran guys that are playing fantastic on the defensive side of the ball. Defensive line should be able to cause a little havoc to a still slightly hobbled quarterback for the Chargers and Herbert. So I would give that game, a pass. I don't think that there's a situation where Cleveland wouldn't come out and play hard, even though they're at the bye. But a lot of times you're at the midseason, situation. Guys are banged up. They got their bags packed. They're going to get a 3-4 day vacation before they have to return to practice. And guys already have their golf clubs out. They have their mini vacations to the Bahamas or wherever the hell they're going. So you got to be careful of that stuff. But Green Bay at Detroit, you don't have to worry nothing there. That's the biggest game of the year for both of them. The team that I worry about is Seattle. They're 1-4. Their last five, they're fading. They're missing their top wide receiver Metcalf, and they're not getting an easy game because they're hosting the Surgeon Rams, who now have everybody back. And this is going to be a very, very tough game for Seattle. And again, the way they're playing, I wouldn't even look, like I say every week, on videos, but you would never buy a damaged box of cereal where half of it was broken and spilled out on the floor. You wouldn't go buying that box. So what the hell are you betting on these teams for? But I look at these charts with where everybody's betting, and I don't use my bets off of that. I feel like I'm one of the tops in the world at this, and not many people. I don't know anybody, but not many have come anywhere close to the winning percentage I've had, and I'm destroying the NFL again for the 13th straight year in a row. No, people all say the NFL is the hardest. I look at it as being the easiest, but one of the key rules in betting, especially in the NFL, is don't bet damaged goods. Because when they lose, then you're going to say, well, that was stupid. This guy was out or that guy's out. The biggest problem at the NFL is you're waiting all the time till Sunday to see if guys are going to play. Washington was a 3-point dog. As soon as Sunday came and they said he's definitely going to go, all of a sudden the Washington team's a -1 favorite. So a 4-point move as you're waiting for that. So how do you bet that early on? That's a little tough because there's so many guys on injury list every single week, and some of these teams hide it a little bit. Teams even getting fined. The NBA is the worst for it, so I don't do NBA, so it makes it easier on my stress level because there is a stress level when you come into that situation of not knowing who's going to play. So sometimes you have to wait it out, even if you think you could grab good line value. Last, we'll go into college football week number 11, the key look at situations, and there's not too many of them, but three. Clemson is hosting Louisville. Clemson's a 10.5-point favorite. If you've been watching these videos, I've been very high on Clemson. I just keep winning with their team totals over. It's a juggernaut offense right now, clicking on all cylinders. But Louisville's no easy pushover, although the defense isn't too good. Clemson should be able to score, but Louisville does score, and Clemson does give up some points. They're not the defense they were of years past. So I put the look-ahead level as just being light for Clemson in that spot, but they do have a game at Virginia Tech next week, and Virginia Tech's a veteran team returning like 18 guys, so Clemson could peak a little bit ahead because Louisville has dropped off the last few weeks. The next one would be Georgia, who is playing Florida in the largest cocktail party game in Jacksonville, so no home field advantage there. Although Georgia fans can easily travel to that game. That's usually a split game, probably a little bit more on the Georgia side, even though the game's in Florida, the state of Florida. But Georgia is 16-point favorite. The total in that game is 52, and Georgia's 6-1 now. That only lost that heartbreaking last bomb touchdown miracle play by Alabama late in the fourth, where they lost that game. They came all the way back from down 4 touchdowns. So we know that Georgia, who they are and how good they are. They have Ole Miss on deck next week, though, and Ole Miss is a pretty good, solid team. That's become a little bit of a rivalry because of Lane Kiffin. Everybody is a rivalry now with Lane Kiffin because the crazy stuff he does on social media. But you look at the situation here, and you have Florida would be a team that's playing pretty well now. They've won 3 out of 4. But Florida, they have 4 wins. They need 2 more wins. But their remaining schedule is Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and then Florida State. So we can give them their best opportunity. My Florida State, that's one of my teams too. Just a horrific season. Everything went to shambles. They can't score. So if we give them that win, they're going to have to win against somebody else. And you would say, well, maybe they could give Georgia a run for the money. But when you look at it, the last 3 years, Georgia won 43-20, 42-20, and 34-7. So they've won by 23, 22, and 27. And even though Florida's a little bit improved, this is such a tough situation. to catch Georgia. But Georgia, again, I will give their look ahead as very high due to the fact that they have been dominating Florida. Years ago, they were a lot better games, and you never knew what was going to happen in that crazy cocktail party game. But Georgia's coming in there thinking we got this game in the bag. We're big favorites. We'll walk out of here with a victory easily, and we'll look ahead to Ole Miss. They're not going to throw out any trick plays or anything special. They'll be saving that for Ole Miss next week. But again, Florida needs to win games, and I guess maybe they're looking at it. I mean, everybody is beatable, and there's really no certainty that an automatic win happens because we've seen upsets happen every single week. Could Florida upset Georgia? Of course they could with a perfect game, but I would still be a little leery of laying the 16 points, even though they won 3 times in a row. And so that's basically what you have there. LSU and Alabama would have been one, but they're both off this week. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you need to ever ask me any questions, you can always email me anytime at Gary Greene Wins, or excuse me, Gary Greene Wins at gmail.com. That's Gary, and then if you look over here, Green, you'll see Grene Wins. So it's Gary Greene Wins at gmail.com. Ask me any questions that you want, and I'll be glad to answer them for you. And be sure to bookmark us to catch all our videos. I'm doing about probably 8 to 10 a week, and I'm trying to make you a more informed sports bettor. I've been doing this for 35 years. I did radio shows, national shows, and shows in the casinos for many, many years, where I did a 3-hour show prepping with every single game. Those shows were very hard work. I had to prep 10 hours to do the 3-hour show, but I would go in depth on every game because I'm a professional bettor. I'm here to try to help you with all the information. So if you don't have time to do the homework, I'm doing the homework for you, trying to put it out in the videos. And eventually I'm going to try to get a newsletter together on a daily basis where maybe we can get that out, and I can do some written stuff as well in case you don't have the time, 15, 20 minutes to watch some of these videos. I try to keep them at 10, but there's just too much information sometimes, and I put NFL and college together for the look-aheads this week instead of separating them. So we hope that all your wagers are winning ones. Make sure that you never bet what you can't afford to lose. Don't bet the parlays, and you'll stay in the action a lot longer. So have a great week ahead, guys and gals, and we'll be back with more videos soon.